The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the Dragon Phoenix Martial Arts Academy, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. The lobby was buzzing with energy as students walked in and out, some in their training uniforms, others still in street clothes. In the center of it all stood Tyler, a young man who carried himself like he owned the world, and in many ways he felt like he did. At just 28 years old, Tyler had already won 3 national martial arts championships. His trophy case at home was overflowing, and his social media accounts were filled with videos of his incredible kicks, punches, and takedowns. Thousands of people followed him online, commenting on every post with fire emojis and words of praise. Today was no different. Tyler stood near the reception desk, his championship belt slung over his shoulder like a badge of honor. A small crowd of younger students had gathered around him, their eyes wide with admiration. He was demonstrating one of his signature moves, a spinning back kick that had won him his last tournament. "See, the key is in the rotation," Tyler explained, his voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You've got to commit fully. No hesitation. That's what separates champions from everyone else." He spun on his heel, his leg whipping through the air with impressive speed and precision. The students gasped and applauded. Tyler grinned, soaking up the attention like sunshine. This was his element. This was where he felt most alive. "Can you teach us that move?" one of the younger boys asked eagerly. Tyler chuckled. "Maybe when you've trained as long as I have, kid. This isn't something you just pick up overnight. It takes years of dedication, discipline, and natural talent." As he spoke, an elderly woman shuffled into view from the hallway that led to the training rooms. She was pushing a yellow mop bucket on wheels, the kind you see janitors use everywhere. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she wore plain work clothes, a blue shirt and dark pants, both a bit worn from years of use. This was Mrs. Rodriguez, the cleaning lady who worked at the academy. She'd been there for as long as anyone could remember, always quiet, always working in the background. Most students barely noticed her. She was just part of the scenery, like the water fountain or the bulletin board covered with tournament announcements. Mrs. Rodriguez moved slowly, carefully guiding her bucket across the lobby floor. She'd just finished mopping the hallway and was heading toward the front entrance. The bucket was heavy, filled with soapy water that sloshed gently with each push. Tyler was in the middle of another demonstration, this time showing off a complex kick combination. He jumped, twisted, and struck the air with rapid-fire precision. His audience was mesmerized. But as he landed from one particularly flashy move, Mrs. Rodriguez's bucket passed nearby. The timing couldn't have been worse. A small splash of water escaped from the bucket, spreading across the floor near Tyler's feet. It wasn't much, just a few drops really, but it was enough to leave a small wet spot on the otherwise pristine floor. Tyler froze mid-motion. His head snapped toward the elderly woman, his expression shifting from pride to irritation in an instant. The smile vanished from his face, replaced by a look of pure disgust. "Seriously?" he said, his voice sharp and cutting. "Watch where you're going." Mrs. Rodriguez stopped immediately, her weathered hands gripping the mop handle. She looked down at the small puddle, then up at Tyler with apologetic eyes. "I'm sorry, young man," she said softly, her voice carrying a slight accent. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to?" Tyler interrupted, his voice rising. "Do you even know who I am? I'm a 3-time national champion. I can't be practicing in puddles like some amateur." The students around him went quiet, uncertain how to react. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious to see what would happen next. Mrs. Rodriguez simply nodded, her expression remaining calm and patient. "I'll clean it right away," she said quietly, beginning to maneuver her mop toward the wet spot. But Tyler wasn't finished. Not even close. He could feel all eyes on him, and something inside him wanted to make this moment bigger, to assert his dominance even further. It was like a switch had flipped in his brain. "You know what?" Tyler said loudly, making sure everyone in the lobby could hear. "They really let anyone work here these days, don't they?" A few nervous laughs rippled through his audience. Tyler's girlfriend, standing near the back of the group, shifted uncomfortably. She tugged on his arm gently. "Tyler, come on," she whispered. "Just let it go." But Tyler pulled his arm away, his ego now fully in control. He took a few steps closer to where Mrs. Rodriguez was quietly mopping up the water, working as quickly as her aged body would allow. "I mean, look at her. Tyler continued, gesturing dramatically. Bet she's never thrown a single punch in her entire life. Probably doesn't even know what a proper stance looks like. More uncomfortable laughter. Mrs. Rodriguez didn't respond. She just continued cleaning, her face neutral, showing neither anger nor hurt. Her silence only seemed to embolden Tyler further. He turned back to his audience, spreading his arms wide. This is a martial arts academy, right? We're supposed to be surrounded by warriors, fighters, people who understand discipline and strength, and instead we've got... He gestured dismissively toward Mrs. Rodriguez. This. One of the older students in the back of the crowd frowned and started to say something, but Tyler was on a roll now. He began showing off again, performing a series of elaborate kicks and strikes, each one more exaggerated than the last. This is what real martial arts looks like, he announced between moves. Power, speed, precision, not shuffling around with a mop bucket. Mrs. Rodriguez finished cleaning the small puddle. Without a word, she straightened up slowly, her movements careful and measured. She gripped her mop bucket handle and began to push it toward the corner of the lobby where her cleaning supplies were stored. Tyler watched her go, a smirk on his face. He felt victorious, like he'd somehow proven a point, though what exactly that point was, even he couldn't have said. All he knew was that everyone was looking at him, talking about him, paying attention to him. And that felt good. All right, where were we? Tyler said, clapping his hands together. Let me show you guys that spinning hook kick I was talking about. But something had shifted in the room. Some of the students were no longer watching him with pure admiration. A few were glancing toward Mrs. Rodriguez with something that looked like pity, or maybe shame. Others were whispering to each other, their expressions troubled. Tyler didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. He was too caught up in his own performance, too lost in the moment to see that he'd crossed a line. The kind of line that, once crossed, changes everything. And in just a few minutes, his entire world was about to turn upside down. The tension in the lobby was thick enough to cut with a knife. Word of what had just happened was spreading through the academy like wildfire. Students who'd been training in the back rooms started trickling out, curious about the commotion. Others who'd witnessed the incident were already pulling out their phones, whispering excitedly to friends who'd missed it. Within minutes, the small crowd around Tyler had nearly doubled in size. What had started as a casual gathering of admirers had turned into something else entirely, something that felt more like a spectacle waiting to happen. Tyler noticed the growing audience and felt a surge of energy. This was exactly what he lived for, the attention, the spotlight, the feeling of being the center of everything. He rolled his shoulders and cracked his neck, warming up like he was about to step into a competition ring. All right, he said, grinning at the expanding crowd. Since we've got an audience now, let me really show you what championship-level martial arts looks like. His girlfriend, Jennifer, stood near the edge of the group, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She had that look on her face, the one Tyler had seen before when he'd gone too far with his bragging or said something thoughtless. But he wasn't looking at her. His eyes were scanning the crowd, feeding off their energy. Tyler, seriously, Jennifer said, her voice barely audible over the murmur of excited students. Can we just go? This is getting weird. But Tyler waved her off without even turning around. Just give me a minute, Jen. This is good content for my channel anyway. He launched into an impressive display of martial arts technique. First came a series of rapid punches so fast they were almost a blur. Then he transitioned into spinning kicks, each one executed with textbook precision. The crowd oohed and ahed at all the right moments. Several students had their phones out now, recording every second. See this right here? Tyler called out between movements. This is a tornado kick, followed by a transition into a butterfly twist. Took me years to perfect this combination. This is what separates the professionals from the amateurs. In the corner of the lobby, Mrs. Rodriguez had finished putting away her cleaning supplies. She stood quietly by her cart, watching the scene unfold with those same calm, unreadable eyes. She made no move to leave, but she wasn't drawing attention to herself either. She simply observed, like someone watching a storm develop on the horizon. Tyler noticed her standing there and felt another opportunity present itself. The cruel part of his brain, the part that enjoyed putting others down to lift himself up, kicked into high gear. You know what the problem is these days? Tyler announced to his audience, his voice dripping with false philosophy. People don't respect the martial arts anymore. They think anyone can do it. They think it's easy. He performed another flashy spinning back kick, landing with exaggerated precision. But it's not easy. It takes dedication. It takes sacrifice. It takes a certain kind of person, someone with warrior spirit. A few students nodded along, caught up in his words. Others looked less convinced, their eyes darting between Tyler and Mrs. Rodriguez uncomfortably. One of the younger students, a teenager named Danny who practically worshipped Tyler, decided to join in. Maybe he wanted to impress his idol, or maybe he just got caught up in the moment. Whatever the reason, he pointed toward Mrs. Rodriguez and said loudly, "Yeah, like I bet she couldn't even defend herself if someone tried to rob her or something." The comment sent a ripple of nervous laughter through parts of the crowd. Others went dead silent, their faces showing clear disapproval. Jennifer closed her eyes and shook her head, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. But Tyler's eyes lit up. The comment had given him an idea, a terrible idea that he somehow thought was brilliant. He stopped his demonstration and turned to face Mrs. Rodriguez directly. "You know what, Danny? That's actually a great point," Tyler said, walking slowly toward the elderly woman. "This is supposed to be a martial arts academy, a place where people learn to defend themselves, to become strong." Mrs. Rodriguez remained still, her hands resting gently on the handle of her cleaning cart. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested she knew exactly where this was going. "So, here's what I'm thinking," Tyler continued, now standing just a few feet away from her. "Let's make this educational. A teaching moment, if you will." The crowd pressed closer, everyone sensing that something significant was about to happen. The lobby had gone from noisy to almost completely silent, with only the sound of Tyler's voice and the occasional nervous shuffle of feet on the wooden floor. Tyler crossed his arms over his chest, his championship belt still draped over his shoulder like a cape. "Mrs. Rodriguez, is it?" he said, his tone mocking despite the polite words. "I've got a proposition for you." The elderly woman looked up at him steadily. "I'm listening," she said softly. "Great," Tyler said, spreading his arms wide as if he were making a generous offer. "Here's the deal. If you can land just one hit on me, just one single hit, I'll personally apologize to you in front of everyone here. Not only that, but I'll clean this entire lobby floor myself. Every square inch of it." The crowd erupted in a mixture of gasps, laughs, and excited chatter. Phones were definitely recording now. Someone in the back whistled. This was the kind of drama that would get thousands of views online. Tyler turned to play to his audience, a cocky grin plastered across his face. "I mean, come on! I'm a 3-time national champion. I've trained with some of the best fighters in the country. If she can even touch me, she deserves an apology and more." Mrs. Rodriguez set down her mop slowly, methodically. She reached for the apron she wore over her work clothes and began to untie it. Her movements were unhurried, almost ceremonial. She folded the apron carefully and placed it on top of her cleaning cart. "Young man," she said, her accent slightly thicker now, perhaps from emotion, "I don't think this is a good idea." But Tyler heard this as fear, as backing down. His grin grew wider. "Oh, come on. Don't be shy. Everyone here wants to see this. It'll be fun. Unless," he paused dramatically, "unless you're scared." The crowd was eating it up. Some were cheering Tyler on. Others were laughing. A few looked deeply uncomfortable but didn't speak up, caught between not wanting to cause trouble and not wanting to watch something cruel unfold. Jennifer finally stepped forward, grabbing Tyler's arm firmly. "Tyler, stop this right now. This isn't funny. You're being a complete jerk." Tyler shook her off more forcefully this time. "Relax, Jen, it's just a demonstration. Nobody's going to get hurt. She probably won't even try to hit me." But Mrs. Rodriguez was still standing there, her apron removed, her posture somehow different now. She rolled her shoulders slightly, stretched her neck to one side, then the other. Small movements, barely noticeable, but something about them seemed practiced, trained. "If you insist on this," Mrs. Rodriguez said quietly, her voice carrying a weight it hadn't before, "then I must warn you, I have trained before. Many years ago." This statement only made Tyler laugh louder. He doubled over slightly, slapping his knee like he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. "Trained? What, in a senior citizens exercise class? Tai Chi in the park?" The crowd's laughter grew louder, encouraged by Tyler's mockery. But not everyone was laughing. At the back of the crowd, someone had started pushing through, urgency in their movements. It was Master Kim, the head instructor of the academy. He'd been in his office handling paperwork when he heard the commotion. Now his face was a mask of concern and alarm. "What's going on out here?" Master Kim called out, but his voice was lost in the noise of the excited crowd. Tyler bounced on the balls of his feet, assuming an exaggerated fighting stance. He held his hands up loosely, confidently, like someone who wasn't taking any of this seriously. Which he wasn't. "Come on then, Mrs. Rodriguez," Tyler taunted, beckoning her forward with one hand. "Show me what you've got. Show everyone here these amazing skills you claim to have." Mrs. Rodriguez looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the crowd of young faces, most of them too excited to understand what they were really witnessing. Finally, she looked at Master Kim, who was desperately trying to push through the wall of students blocking his path. And then, very slowly, she nodded and took a single step forward. The atmosphere in the lobby had shifted from casual entertainment to something electric, something dangerous. Every eye was locked on the two figures in the center of the room: Tyler, the young champion with everything to prove and nothing to lose, and Mrs. Rodriguez, the quiet cleaning lady who'd just accepted a challenge that everyone assumed she'd lose. Tyler was still bouncing on his feet, his movements loose and confident. He threw a few shadow punches into the air, showing off for the cameras that were now recording from multiple angles. His social media was going to blow up with this content. He could already imagine the comments, the shares, the new followers flooding in. "This is going to be legendary," he muttered to himself, loud enough for the front row of students to hear and chuckle. Mrs. Rodriguez, in contrast, stood perfectly still. She'd removed her work gloves now, too, setting them neatly beside her apron on the cleaning cart. Her hands were wrinkled and age-spotted, the hands of someone who'd spent decades doing hard work. But there was something about the way she held them, relaxed but ready, that should have given Tyler pause. It didn't. "All right. Ground rules," Tyler announced, addressing the crowd as much as his opponent. "Nothing too crazy. Just basic striking. If the old lady can land any hit on me anywhere at all, she wins. Fair enough?" He said it like he was being incredibly generous, like he was giving her a massive advantage. The crowd murmured their agreement. This seemed fair. After all, Tyler was a champion. Surely he could avoid getting hit by an elderly woman even if he stood still. "Whenever you're ready," Tyler said, gesturing toward himself with both hands. "Come at me. Don't be shy." Mrs. Rodriguez took a small step forward, then another. Her movement was careful, measured. She wasn't in any rush. Tyler watched her approach with amusement dancing in his eyes. This was going to be over in seconds, and it was going to be hilarious. From the back of the crowd, Master Kim's voice finally broke through. "Tyler, stop this immediately. Everyone clear out. This is not—" But his words were drowned out by the excited chatter of the students, by the dings and buzzes of phones recording, by the general chaos of a crowd watching something they thought would be funny unfold before their eyes. 30 seconds, someone in the crowd called out. "Let's give her 30 seconds to land a hit." Tyler grinned. 30 seconds? That's way too generous. How about 10? Actually, you know what? Let's make it interesting. He pulled his phone from his pocket and set a timer. 1 minute. If she can't hit me in 1 whole minute, she has to admit in front of everyone that she's never trained a day in her life. "Tyler, no." Jennifer's voice cut through from somewhere in the crowd. "This is cruel, stop it." But Tyler wasn't listening anymore. He was too far gone, too drunk on attention and his own ego. He hit start on the timer and held the phone up so everyone could see. 60 seconds appeared on the screen and began counting down. "Clock's ticking," Tyler said, waving Mrs. Rodriguez forward. The elderly woman didn't rush. She took another step, her feet moving in a way that seemed almost gliding, like she weighed nothing at all. Tyler noticed this, and his smirk faltered for just a fraction of a second. But then he shook it off. Probably just old person shuffle, he told himself. He decided to make the first move just to get things started. Nothing serious, just a lazy jab thrown in her direction. More of a testing poke than a real strike. He wanted to see how she'd react, maybe watch her flinch or stumble backward in fear. What happened instead made him blink in confusion. His fist moved forward on target, technically perfect. But somehow Mrs. Rodriguez wasn't there anymore. She'd shifted slightly to the side, and his punch sailed through empty air. Her hand had come up too, just barely touching his extended arm, guiding it past her with the gentlest pressure. Tyler frowned. Lucky dodge, he thought. He pulled his arm back and tried again, this time with a quick 1-2 combination. Left jab, right cross. Basic stuff, the kind of combo taught in the first week of training. Again, his fists found nothing but air. Mrs. Rodriguez had moved not by jumping back or ducking away, but by turning her body just enough that his punches missed by mere inches. And again, her hands had been there, barely making contact with his arms, seeming to guide his strikes away from her. The crowd's energy shifted slightly. The laughter was getting quieter. People were starting to pay closer attention. Tyler's frown deepened. This wasn't going the way he'd imagined. He decided to step it up. He threw a proper combination now, the kind he'd use in an actual sparring match. 3 punches followed by a low kick to the leg. Mrs. Rodriguez moved like water flowing around rocks. Her feet barely left the ground, but she seemed to drift just out of range of every strike. The kick that should have connected with her shin somehow missed completely as she lifted her foot, just high enough at just the right moment. 45 seconds left. Someone called out. Tyler felt a small flutter of frustration in his chest. This was taking longer than he'd expected. Time to end it with something flashy. He stepped back, giving himself space, then launched into one of his signature moves, a spinning back kick that had won him points in countless tournaments. It was beautiful, technically perfect. His body rotated smoothly, his leg extended at exactly the right moment, his foot aimed precisely at center mass. There was no way anyone could avoid this, especially not someone who moved as slowly as Mrs. Rodriguez wasn't there. She hadn't jumped back or ducked. She'd stepped forward, moving inside the arc of his kick before it could generate any real power. Suddenly she was close to him, closer than she'd been this entire time. Tyler felt her hand, just for a moment, resting lightly on his chest, and then he felt his supporting leg being swept out from under him. For a moment, Tyler experienced something he hadn't felt in years, the complete loss of control. His body was suddenly horizontal when it should have been vertical. The ceiling of the academy filled his vision where the floor should have been. Time seemed to slow down as his brain struggled to process what was happening. The thought that flashed through his mind was simple and devastating. I'm falling. Then his back hit the wooden floor with a thunderous thud that echoed through the now silent lobby. The impact drove every bit of air from his lungs. He gasped like a fish out of water, his mouth opening and closing, his chest heaving but unable to draw breath. Above him, Mrs. Rodriguez stood calmly, her hand no longer on his chest, her expression unchanged. She hadn't celebrated, hadn't gloated, hadn't even smiled. She simply looked down at him with those same steady, unreadable eyes. The timer on Tyler's phone, which had fallen from his hand and skittered across the floor, showed 32 seconds remaining. The lobby was absolutely silent. Not a single person spoke. Not a single phone notification dinged. Even Master Kim, who had finally pushed through to the front of the crowd, stood frozen in place, his mouth slightly open. Tyler lay on the floor, still struggling to breathe, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. His championship belt had fallen off during his landing, and now lay a few feet away from him, looking suddenly meaningless. The only sound in the entire building was Tyler's desperate wheezing as he tried to pull air back into his lungs, and the quiet, calm voice of Mrs. Rodriguez as she said, "Are you all right, young man?" The silence that followed Tyler's fall was the kind that presses against your eardrums, the kind that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. 60 people stood frozen in the lobby of the Dragon Phoenix Martial Arts Academy, and not one of them could process what they'd just witnessed. Tyler finally managed to draw a ragged breath, then another. His chest heaved as oxygen rushed back into his lungs. The pain in his back was sharp and immediate, but it was nothing compared to the pain in his ego. He rolled onto his side, his face flushed red, partly from lack of air and partly from humiliation. Mrs. Rodriguez extended her hand toward him, offering to help him up. It was a simple gesture, kind and respectful, the same thing any decent person would do after accidentally hurting someone. But to Tyler, lying there on the floor in front of all his students and fans, that offered hand felt like the final insult. He slapped it away and scrambled to his feet on his own, stumbling slightly as his balance returned. His legs felt shaky, uncertain. He'd been thrown before in training, of course, but never like that. Never so easily. Never so quickly. And never by someone he'd completely underestimated. That was, Tyler started to say, but his voice came out as a croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. That was a lucky shot. You just caught me off guard. Even as the words left his mouth, he knew how pathetic they sounded. The crowd knew it too. He could see it in their faces, that mixture of pity and second-hand embarrassment that made him want to sink through the floor. But before anyone could respond, Master Kim finally found his voice. Everyone stop recording now. His tone left no room for argument. It was the voice of someone who'd commanded respect for decades, someone who didn't need to shout to be obeyed. The students hesitated for just a moment, but the look on Master Kim's face made them comply. Phones were lowered, recording stopped. Some students quickly tried to pocket their devices, while others stood holding them awkwardly, unsure what to do next. Master Kim's face was a complicated mixture of emotions: anger, disappointment, resignation, and something else. Something that looked almost like fear. He took a deep breath, his jaw working as he seemed to struggle with what to say next. Mrs. Rodriguez, he began, turning to the elderly woman with a slight bow of respect. I am so deeply sorry. This should never have happened. I take full responsibility for... But Mrs. Rodriguez raised her hand gently, stopping him mid-sentence. It's all right, Master Kim. The young man wanted a demonstration. I gave him one. Her voice was still soft, still calm. She showed no signs of being out of breath, no indication that what had just happened had required any real effort on her part. She moved to her cleaning cart and began putting her apron back on, like she was preparing to return to work, as if nothing unusual had occurred. Tyler watched her with a mixture of confusion and growing dread. Something was happening here, something he didn't understand. The way Master Kim had apologized to her, the way he'd called her by name with such respect, the way he'd ordered everyone to stop recording. This wasn't normal. This wasn't how you treated the cleaning staff. Jennifer pushed through the crowd and grabbed Tyler's arm. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Her concern was genuine, but there was anger in her voice too. I told you to stop. I told you this was wrong. Tyler pulled away from her, his pride still making him defensive. I'm fine. It was just a fluke. She got lucky because I wasn't taking it seriously. But even as he said it, he was replaying the moment in his mind. The way she'd moved. The way she'd seemed to barely touch him and yet completely controlled his fall. The way she'd stepped inside his kick like she'd known exactly what he was going to do before he did it. Master Kim turned to address the crowd, and the weight of his authority made everyone go quiet again. Students, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Some of you have been training here for years. Some of you just started, but all of you just learned an important lesson whether you realize it or not. He paused, making sure he had everyone's attention. Tyler felt like the words were directed specifically at him, even though Master Kim was addressing the entire group. Let me properly introduce you to Mrs. Rodriguez, Master Kim continued. Though many of you walk past her every day, I doubt any of you really know who she is. Mrs. Rodriguez looked up from retying her apron, her expression suggesting she wished Master Kim wouldn't make a fuss. But he continued anyway. Mrs. Rodriguez isn't just the cleaning lady. She is the owner of this building. She has been for the past 15 years. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Heads turned toward each other in confusion. Tyler felt his stomach drop. She could hire anyone to clean this facility, Master Kim went on. She could hire a whole staff if she wanted. But she chooses to do the work herself because she believes, as she's told me many times, that there is dignity in all honest work, that no job is beneath anyone. The students were starting to whisper now, the revelation hitting them in waves. Tyler stood frozen, his mind struggling to process this information. She owned the building. The entire building. The place he walked through every day like he owned it. But Master Kim wasn't finished. Not even close. Mrs. Rodriguez is also, he continued, his voice taking on a tone of deep respect, a 6th-degree black belt in judo. She studied for over 40 years in Argentina before moving to this country. She trained under students of Master Koichi Tohei, one of the most respected Aikido masters in the world. The whispers stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. She has forgotten more about martial arts than most of us will ever learn, Master Kim said, and there was sadness in his voice now. And she has been more patient with all of you, with all of us, than we deserve. Tyler felt like he might be sick. Every word Master Kim spoke was another weight added to his chest. A 6th-degree black belt? 40 years of training? This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. She was just an old woman with a mop bucket. She was supposed to be nobody. But the way she'd moved, the way she'd put him on the floor so easily, it all made horrible, perfect sense now. One of the younger students, a girl who'd been training for just a few months, raised her hand timidly. But it was why? Why does she clean if she's so accomplished? If she owns the building? Mrs. Rodriguez answered before Master Kim could. Her voice was gentle, patient, like she was explaining something simple to a child. Because someone needs to clean. Because the work matters. Because I can. She finished tying her apron and picked up her mop. I learned long ago that true strength isn't about what you can do to others. It's about what you choose not to do. It's about when you choose to walk away, to be kind, to be humble. Her eyes found Tyler in the crowd. He wanted to look away but couldn't. The young man here, he has talent. Much talent. But talent without character is not just worthless, it's dangerous. To others and to yourself. Tyler felt every eye in the room turned to him. The weight of their judgment was crushing. His girlfriend wouldn't even look at him. The younger students who'd been cheering him on moments ago now seemed to be seeing him as if for the first time. And they didn't like what they saw. Mrs. Rodriguez, Master Kim said quietly, "Would you be willing to stay for a few minutes? I think there's more these students need to understand." She looked at her watch, then at the faces of the young people surrounding her. After a moment, she nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "I think perhaps there is." The crowd shifted uncomfortably as Mrs. Rodriguez set down her mop and turned to face them fully. Master Kim stepped aside, giving her the floor, literally and figuratively. The elderly woman looked at the sea of young faces before her, most of them still in shock, trying to reconcile the person they'd ignored for months or years with the skilled martial artist who'd just dropped their hero to the floor. "When I first came to this country," Mrs. Rodriguez began, her accented voice soft but clear, "I was 52 years old. In Argentina, I had my own dojo. I taught judo and aikido to hundreds of students over many years." She paused, her eyes distant, remembering. "But here my credentials meant nothing. My accent was too thick. My age was too advanced. People saw an older immigrant woman and they made assumptions." Tyler felt each word like a physical blow. He'd made those exact assumptions. They all had. "I didn't come here planning to teach," she continued. "I came because my daughter married an American man, and I wanted to be near my grandchildren. The martial arts, I thought, were behind me. A chapter of my life that had closed." She gestured around the lobby at the walls decorated with tournament photos and achievement certificates. "But then I found this building. It was abandoned, falling apart. And I saw potential. I bought it with money I'd saved over many years. I fixed it up. And I offered it to Master Kim here to open his academy." Master Kim nodded, confirming her words. "I couldn't have started this school without her generosity. She charged me half the market rent for the first 5 years. She's the reason any of you are able to train here." This revelation sent another wave of shock through the students. Some looked ashamed. Others looked confused, still trying to piece everything together. "But why clean?" someone asked from the back. "Why not just be the owner? Why not tell people who you are?" Mrs. Rodriguez smiled slightly, the first real smile she'd shown since this whole situation began. "Because I wanted to see," she said simply. "I wanted to see what kind of people trained here. How they treated others, whether they had learned what martial arts is really supposed to teach." She turned her gaze back to Tyler, and he felt himself shrink under it. "You see, young man, martial arts is not just about kicks and punches. It's not about trophies and medals and how many people follow you on the internet." Tyler's face burned. How did she know about his social media? "Real martial arts is about discipline, respect, humility, and character," Mrs. Rodriguez continued. "It's about being strong enough to be gentle, skilled enough to choose not to fight, confident enough to be humble." She began to move around the lobby as she spoke, not to pace nervously but with purpose, like a teacher addressing a classroom. Some of the students had tears in their eyes. Others looked like they wanted to disappear. "In judo we have a principle called Jita Kyoe," she explained. "It means mutual welfare and benefit. The idea that we improve ourselves not by defeating others but by helping each other grow. When you throw your training partner, you're not trying to hurt them. You're helping them learn to fall safely, to become stronger." Tyler thought about all the times he'd trained, all the times he'd celebrated putting someone on the mat, all the times he'd bragged about his victories. Had he ever once thought about helping his training partners improve? In Aikido, Mrs. Rodriguez continued, we learn to blend with an attack rather than meet force with force. We redirect energy. We turn aggression into harmony. The goal is not to destroy your opponent, but to neutralize the conflict itself. She stopped walking and stood in the center of the lobby, her hands clasped in front of her. What I did to you today, she said, looking directly at Tyler, was not a fight. It was a lesson. I didn't attack you. I simply allowed your own force to work against you. The words hung in the air. Tyler replayed the moment in his mind for the 100th time. She was right. She hadn't struck him or grabbed him violently. She'd barely touched him. His own spinning kick had put him off balance, and she'd simply helped gravity do the rest. I could have hurt you, Mrs. Rodriguez said, and now her voice carried a weight it hadn't before. With the position I had, with your balance already broken, I could have done serious damage. But that would have taught you nothing except to fear me. And fear is not understanding. Jennifer, still standing near Tyler, spoke up. Her voice was shaky but determined. I tried to stop him. I told him he was being cruel, but he wouldn't listen. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded gently. Then you have good instincts, young lady. The challenge isn't just learning to fight. It's learning when not to fight, and learning to speak up when you see wrong, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. Master Kim stepped forward again. Mrs. Rodriguez occasionally observes classes. She's given me advice over the years on technique, on teaching methods, on philosophy. Every suggestion she's made has improved this academy. But she always asked me not to tell anyone about her background. Why? Danny asked. The same student who'd made the mocking comment about Mrs. Rodriguez not being able to defend herself. His voice was small now, guilty. Because I wanted to earn respect through my actions, not my titles, Mrs. Rodriguez answered. A belt is just fabric. A rank is just a word. What matters is how you carry yourself, how you treat others, whether you embody the principles you claim to believe in. She looked around at all the students. Every day I've worked here, I've watched you train. I've seen your dedication, your improvement, but I've also seen ego growing alongside skill. I've seen arrogance disguised as confidence. I've seen students treating victory as domination rather than as an opportunity to learn. The criticism was gentle, but devastatingly accurate. Tyler wasn't the only one feeling its sting. Other students shifted uncomfortably, recognizing themselves in her words. When you have skill, people will praise you, Mrs. Rodriguez said. They will tell you how great you are. They will put you on a pedestal. And if you're not careful, you will start to believe that this makes you better than others. Not just better at fighting, but better as a person. And that, she said firmly, is when you stop being a martial artist and become just a bully with technique. Tyler felt tears stinging his eyes. He blinked rapidly, refusing to let them fall, but it was getting harder. Everything she was saying was true. He'd become exactly what she was describing. When had that happened? When had winning tournaments become more important than why he'd started training in the first place? So I ask all of you, Mrs. Rodriguez said, addressing everyone now. What are you training for? Is it for trophies? For followers on social media? To feel superior to others? She paused. Or is it to become a better person? To develop character along with capability? To learn to protect those who need protecting, rather than to dominate those weaker than you? The question hung in the air and no one had an answer. Or rather, everyone had an answer, but most of them didn't like what their honest answer would be. Mrs. Rodriguez picked up her mop again. I'll leave you all to think about these things. Master Kim, thank you for your patience with an old woman's lecture. No, Master Kim said firmly. Thank you. This is exactly what they needed to hear, what I needed to hear. As Mrs. Rodriguez turned back to her cleaning cart, Tyler finally found his voice. It came out rough, broken. Wait! Mrs. Rodriguez stopped and turned slowly to face Tyler. The entire lobby held its breath. Every eye shifted between the elderly woman and the young champion, waiting to see what would happen next. Tyler stood there, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. His championship belt still lay on the floor where it had fallen, but he didn't move to pick it up. For the first time since this whole thing began, he truly looked at Mrs. Rodriguez, not as an obstacle or a target for his mockery, but as a person. A person who had shown him more grace than he deserved. Tyler started, then stopped. His throat felt tight. All the cocky words, all the smooth talk that usually came so easily to him, had vanished completely. He swallowed hard and tried again. I don't know what to say. Then perhaps just say what you feel, Mrs. Rodriguez suggested gently. Tyler looked down at his feet, unable to meet her eyes. Shame washed over him in waves. He'd made his career, his identity out of being the best, being the strongest, being the champion. But right now, flat on the floor or standing up, he felt smaller than he'd ever felt in his life. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "I'm so sorry. Not just for today. For every single day I walked past you and didn't even see you. For thinking—" He paused, forcing himself to be honest. "For thinking I was better than you because of what I could do. Because of my medals and my reputation." He finally looked up, and his eyes were red-rimmed. "You were right. About all of it. I became exactly what you said, a bully with technique. I forgot why I started training in the first place. I forgot that martial arts is supposed to make you a better person, not just a better fighter." The crowd was completely silent. Some students were crying openly now. Others stared at the ground, reflecting on their own behavior, their own attitudes. Jennifer moved closer to Tyler, her hand finding his. She didn't say anything, but her presence offered support, maybe even forgiveness, though he wasn't sure he deserved it yet. "I see you," Mrs. Rodriguez said softly, and Tyler realized she was answering what he'd said about not seeing her. "And I see that you understand now. That's important. But understanding is only the first step. What's the next step?" Tyler asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Rodriguez considered the question for a moment. "The next step is to take this feeling, the shame and regret you're experiencing right now, and use it to become better. Not to punish yourself endlessly, but to learn from it, to make different choices going forward." Master Kim approached Tyler, his expression serious but not unkind. "Tyler, you have more natural talent than any student I've trained in 20 years. But Mrs. Rodriguez is right. Talent without character is dangerous. And lately I've been watching your character slip while your skill improved. That's my failure as much as yours. I should have addressed this sooner." Tyler shook his head. "No, Master Kim, this is on me. I let the winds go to my head. I started believing my own hype. I stopped listening to people who tried to help me, like Jennifer." He glanced at his girlfriend, whose eyes were also wet with tears. "I pushed away anyone who tried to tell me I was going down the wrong path." Danny, the younger student who'd made the mocking comment earlier, stepped forward hesitantly. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm sorry too. What I said was mean and stupid. I was just trying to impress Tyler, but that's not an excuse." Mrs. Rodriguez turned to him with the same patient kindness. "Thank you for your apology, young man. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. That's another thing martial arts should teach us. The strength to be vulnerable, to acknowledge our mistakes." Other students began offering their own apologies, creating a wave of confessions and regrets. They apologized for ignoring her, for walking past her like she was invisible, for not offering help when she was carrying heavy equipment, for 1,000 small indignities that had accumulated over months and years. Mrs. Rodriguez listened to each one with grace and acceptance. She didn't make anyone grovel or beg for forgiveness. She simply acknowledged their words with a nod and a kind look, showing them the same respect they'd failed to show her. When the apologies finally subsided, Master Kim cleared his throat. "I think we all need to take a hard look at what we're teaching here. Not just the physical techniques, but the philosophy behind them. Mrs. Rodriguez, would you be willing to come speak to our students more regularly? Maybe lead some classes on the mental and spiritual aspects of martial arts?" Mrs. Rodriguez smiled, a real smile this time, warm and genuine. "I would be honored, Master Kim. But only if the students truly want to learn. Not because they feel obligated, but because they understand the value." A chorus of voices immediately responded, students calling out their agreement, their eagerness to learn from her. It was clear that the dynamic in the academy had shifted fundamentally in the span of half an hour. Tyler watched all of this unfold, still processing everything. He'd walked into this lobby less than an hour ago feeling like he owned the world. Now he stood here realizing how little he actually understood about anything that mattered. "Mrs. Rodriguez," he said, drawing her attention back to him, "I made a promise earlier. I said if you could hit me, I'd apologize and clean the entire lobby floor myself. You don't have to," she began, but Tyler held up his hand. "No, I do. A promise is a promise. And besides," he said, managing a weak smile, "I think I need to remember what it feels like to do honest work, to not be the champion for a while, to just be someone contributing something useful. Mrs. Rodriguez studied his face for a long moment, seeming to measure his sincerity. Finally, she nodded. "All right. The mop and bucket are there," she said, gesturing to her cart. "The cleaning solution is in the blue bottle. You'll need to do 3 passes to get it properly clean. Start from the far corner and work your way back to the entrance. Or you'll trap yourself." Tyler nodded, grateful for the concrete instructions, grateful to have something to do with his hands while his mind continued to reel. He walked over to the cleaning cart and picked up the mop. It was heavier than he expected, or maybe he was just weak from everything that had happened. As he began to work, dipping the mop in the bucket and starting in the far corner like Mrs. Rodriguez had instructed, the crowd began to disperse. Some students headed to the changing rooms to continue their training. Others left entirely, needing time to process what they'd witnessed. But a few remained. Jennifer stood near the wall, watching Tyler work with a complex expression on her face. Danny and a couple of other younger students grabbed extra mops from the supply closet and joined in, working alongside Tyler in silence. Master Kim stood with Mrs. Rodriguez, the two of them conversing quietly in the corner. Every now and then, Master Kim would laugh at something she said, the tension of the past hour finally beginning to ease. Tyler mopped methodically, focusing on the simple, repetitive motion. Push forward, pull back, dip in the bucket, wring out the excess. It was meditative in its way, humbling. This was what Mrs. Rodriguez did multiple times a week, maintaining the space where he and others trained, keeping it clean and safe and welcoming, and he'd mocked her for it. The thought made him work harder, scrubbing at spots on the floor with extra effort, trying somehow to make up for his cruelty through elbow grease and determination. As he worked his way across the lobby floor, Tyler found himself thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The victories that had inflated his ego, the praise that had gone to his head, the way he'd started measuring his worth by his achievements rather than his character. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of why he'd fallen in love with martial arts in the first place. It hadn't been about winning, not at first. It had been about the discipline, the focus, the feeling of mastering something difficult. It had been about pushing past his own limitations and discovering that he was capable of more than he thought. When had that pure motivation been replaced by the need for validation, for attention, for dominance? The lobby was nearly clean now. Tyler's back ached from the unfamiliar work, and his hands were starting to develop small blisters from gripping the mop handle. But there was something satisfying about it too, something real and tangible. This wasn't like tournament victories that faded into memory. This was actual visible improvement to the space around him. Mrs. Rodriguez approached as he finished the last section. "You did well," she said, inspecting his work. "Very thorough. Better than some people I've hired professionally." Tyler set down the mop and wiped sweat from his forehead. "Thank you for letting me do it. I know I didn't earn your kindness today, but thank you anyway." "Kindness isn't something you earn," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "It's something you give freely. That's another lesson martial arts should teach us. We should be strongest with those who are weakest, kindest to those who have wronged us. That's real strength." Tyler nodded, the truth of her words settling deep in his chest. "Will you really come teach classes here? Because I'd like to learn from you. Really learn not just techniques, but everything. The philosophy, the character building, all of it." Mrs. Rodriguez looked at him carefully, and Tyler felt like she was seeing all the way through him. Seeing his sincerity, but also his struggles, his ego that would fight against humility, his pride that would resist correction. The next morning, Tyler arrived at the academy before anyone else. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. He'd barely slept the night before, his mind replaying the events of the previous day over and over. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw himself falling, saw the shock on the faces of the students, felt the crushing weight of his own humiliation. But more than that, he kept seeing Mrs. Rodriguez's face. Not angry, not triumphant, just calm and patient, offering him a lesson when she could have simply walked away. That image bothered him more than anything else because it forced him to confront a truth he'd been avoiding for years. He'd become someone he didn't like very much. Tyler pulled out his phone and opened his social media accounts. His hands hovered over the keyboard. He'd gained 3,000 new followers overnight from people who'd heard about the incident secondhand. His inbox was flooded with messages, some supportive, many mocking, others asking for the full story. He thought about making an excuse, spinning the story to make himself look better. He could say he'd slipped, that it was an accident, that the old lady had gotten lucky. His ego screamed at him to protect his reputation, to salvage what he could of his image. But as he stared at the screen, he heard Mrs. Rodriguez's voice in his head. Real strength is knowing when not to fight. Tyler took a deep breath and began typing. His fingers moved slowly at first, then faster as the words poured out. He wrote about what had really happened, taking full responsibility for his arrogance, his cruelty, his assumptions. He wrote about Mrs. Rodriguez and who she really was. He wrote about the lessons he'd learned and the person he wanted to become. When he finished, he read through it twice. It was honest, brutally so. Posting it would likely cost him followers, maybe even sponsors. His reputation as an undefeated champion would be tarnished by his own admission of being defeated so easily. But that was the point, wasn't it? His reputation had been built on ego and arrogance. Maybe it was time to build something better. He hit post and put his phone away. The academy door opened behind him, and Tyler turned to see Master Kim entering, carrying his gym bag and a cup of coffee. The instructor stopped when he saw Tyler sitting on the bench in the lobby. "You're here early," Master Kim observed, his tone neutral. "Couldn't sleep," Tyler admitted. "Master Kim, can I ask you something?" The older man sat down beside him, setting his coffee on the bench between them. "Of course. How long have you known? About Mrs. Rodriguez, I mean. About who she really is?" Master Kim smiled slightly. "From the very beginning. She told me her background when she offered me this building. She said she wanted to help create a place where real martial arts could be taught. Not just fighting techniques, but the philosophy behind them." "And the cleaning?" Tyler asked. "Was that some kind of test?" "No," Master Kim said, shaking his head. "She really does believe in the dignity of work. All work. But yes, she also wanted to observe. She'd seen too many dojos. Too many schools where students learned to fight but never learned why fighting should be the last resort. She wanted to see if this place would be different." Tyler felt a fresh wave of shame. "And it wasn't different. We failed that test spectacularly." "Not all of you," Master Kim said quietly. "Some students always treated her with respect. Your girlfriend Jennifer, for example. She often offered to help carry heavy equipment. Young Amanda from the evening classes always thanked her for keeping the facilities clean. But yes, many students, and I include myself in this, took her presence for granted. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun rise through the windows. "I'm going to take a break from competitions," Tyler said finally. "Maybe a long break. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not winning tournaments, when I don't have a crowd cheering for me." Master Kim nodded approvingly. "That's wise. Competition isn't bad in itself, but it can become an addiction. The validation, the attention, the proof of your worth measured in wins and losses. It's easy to lose yourself in that. Did you ever go through something like this?" Tyler asked. "A moment where you realized you'd lost your way?" Master Kim laughed, but it was a sad sound. "Many times. I've been teaching for 25 years, and I've had to relearn humility more often than I'd like to admit. The teacher can become just as arrogant as the student. Believing their knowledge makes them superior. Mrs. Rodriguez has been a quiet reminder to me as well. Though I'm ashamed to say I haven't always heeded that reminder." The door opened again, and students began trickling in for the early morning classes. They looked at Tyler with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Word had spread beyond just those who'd witnessed the incident. The story was all over the local martial arts community now, probably embellished and distorted with each retelling. Tyler stood up, preparing to face the day. "Master Kim, I know I need to rebuild trust here. Not just with you and Mrs. Rodriguez, but with everyone. I don't know how long that will take. Start by showing up," Master Kim said simply. "Keep showing up, keep working, keep learning. Don't make grand promises about changing. Just change one day at a time. That's all any of us can do." Over the next few weeks, Tyler did exactly that. He showed up early and stayed late. He helped newer students with their forms. Not showing off, but genuinely trying to help them improve. He cleaned equipment after training sessions without being asked. He listened more than he talked. It wasn't easy. Old habits died hard. His ego would flare up sometimes when someone executed a technique better than him, or when he saw other fighters posting their victories online. But each time he felt that old arrogance rising, he'd remember the feeling of hitting the floor, of looking up at Mrs. Rodriguez's calm face, of understanding in one painful moment how far he'd fallen from the person he wanted to be. Mrs. Rodriguez began teaching a weekly class on martial arts philosophy. Tyler never missed a session. Neither did many other students, including several black belts who'd been training longer than Tyler had been alive. They sat in a circle on the mat while Mrs. Rodriguez spoke about concepts like Zanshin, remaining awareness, Mushin, mind without mind, and Fudoshin, immovable mind. But she didn't just lecture. She told stories from her own training, from her years teaching in Argentina, from moments when she'd failed to live up to the principles she taught. She made herself vulnerable, showing them that mastery wasn't about perfection but about continuous growth. During one session, she spoke about her decision to come to America. I left behind my school, my students, my reputation, everything I'd built over 40 years. And when I came here, I was nobody, just an old woman with an accent and outdated credentials. Weren't you angry? One student asked. Didn't it hurt to start over from nothing? Of course it hurt, Mrs. Rodriguez admitted. My ego was bruised. I had been Master Rodriguez's teacher, respected in my community. Here I was just Elena, the cleaning lady. But that experience taught me something important. It taught me that my identity wasn't in my titles or my reputation. It was in my character, in how I treated others, in whether I lived according to my principles even when no one was watching or applauding. Tyler absorbed every word. He'd built his entire identity on being a champion, on winning, on external validation. What would be left of him if all that was stripped away? The question terrified him. But Mrs. Rodriguez's example showed him there could be something better, something more stable and real than trophies and social media followers. One evening, about a month after the incident, Tyler was cleaning the mats after practice when Mrs. Rodriguez approached him. She'd been watching him work from across the room. "You've changed," she observed. It wasn't a question. Tyler stopped what he was doing and straightened up. "I'm trying to. Some days are harder than others." "That's honest," she said, nodding. "Change is never a straight line. There will be setbacks, moments when you fall back into old patterns. What matters is that you keep trying." "Can I ask you something?" Tyler said. "That day when I challenged you, you knew you could put me down easily. Why did you wait? Why didn't you just refuse from the start?" Mrs. Rodriguez smiled slightly. "Because telling you wouldn't have worked. You had to experience it. Sometimes the only way to teach a lesson is to let someone face the consequences of their actions. If I'd simply told you that you were arrogant, that you needed to change, would you have listened?" Tyler shook his head. "No, definitely not. Exactly. You needed to feel what it was like to be humbled. Not to destroy you, but to crack open that armor of ego you'd built around yourself. Only then could the real learning begin." "I'm grateful you didn't hurt me," Tyler said. "You could have, easily." "Violence should only ever be used to protect, never to punish or prove a point," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "What happened between us wasn't a fight. It was a teaching moment. There's a big difference." She patted his shoulder gently. "Keep going, Tyler. You're on the right path now. It won't always be easy, but it will be worth it." As she walked away, Tyler returned to cleaning the mats with renewed purpose. For the first time in years, he felt like he was training for the right reasons, not for trophies or followers or validation, but to become a better person, and strangely, that felt more satisfying than any championship belt ever had. 3 months had passed since the incident that changed everything. The Dragon Phoenix Martial Arts Academy had transformed in subtle but important ways. Students held doors open for each other. They bowed with genuine respect rather than empty ritual. The atmosphere had shifted from competitive aggression to collaborative growth. Tyler had changed most of all. He arrived at the academy on a Saturday morning, not for his own training, but to help Master Kim prepare for a special event. Today, Mrs. Rodriguez would be officially recognized in a ceremony honoring her contributions to the academy and the martial arts community. Local instructors from other schools were coming, along with students past and present. As Tyler set up chairs in the main training hall, he reflected on the journey of the past 3 months. It hadn't been easy. There were days when his old self would surface, when he'd feel that familiar hunger for recognition and validation. But now he had tools to recognize those feelings and choose differently. Jennifer approached, carrying a box of programs for the ceremony. They'd broken up for a few weeks after the incident but had recently reconciled. Their relationship was different now, built on mutual respect rather than her being an accessory to his success. "Thank you, Master Kim," Tyler said carefully. "Can I think about it?" Master Kim smiled knowingly. Of course, take your time. There's no rush. Mrs. Rodriguez watched the exchange with those perceptive eyes of hers. After Master Kim walked away, she said, "Competition isn't wrong, Tyler. It's a tool for growth like anything else. The question is why you compete and how you handle both victory and defeat." "I'm not sure I trust my reasons yet," Tyler admitted. "Part of me wants to go just to prove I'm still good. To show everyone I'm not washed up. That's the old me talking. But there's another part too, isn't there?" Mrs. Rodriguez prompted gently. Tyler nodded slowly. "Yeah. A part that wants to test what I've learned. To see if I can compete with humility, with respect for my opponents. To see if I can lose gracefully or win without arrogance." "That sounds like a good reason to me," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "But only you can decide when you're ready. There's no shame in waiting until you're sure." The reception continued around them, filled with laughter and stories. Tyler watched Mrs. Rodriguez move through the crowd, greeting old friends and new students with the same warm respect. She treated the 9th-degree black belt and the white belt beginner exactly the same way, seeing the person rather than the rank. Later that evening, after most guests had left, Tyler helped clean up the training hall. It had become his habit, this work that once would have seemed beneath him. Now he found peace in it, a meditation that helped him stay grounded. Jennifer joined him, picking up discarded programs and straightening chairs. They worked in comfortable silence for a while before she spoke. "I'm proud of you, you know, for how far you've come." Tyler paused, leaning on a broom. "I'm proud of you, too, for not giving up on me when you had every reason to, for calling me out on my behavior even when I didn't want to hear it. That's what people who care about each other do," Jennifer said simply. "They tell the truth even when it's hard." As they finished cleaning, Master Kim approached with Mrs. Rodriguez. "Before you both leave, there's something we'd like to discuss with you." They sat together in a circle on the mats, the four of them, and Master Kim explained an idea he and Mrs. Rodriguez had been developing. They wanted to create a mentorship program at the academy, pairing experienced students with newer ones, not just to teach techniques but to guide them in the philosophy and character aspects of martial arts. "We'd like you to be part of the first group of mentors," Master Kim said, looking at both Tyler and Jennifer. "You both have something valuable to offer." Tyler was surprised. "Me, after everything that happened? Why would anyone want me as a mentor?" Mrs. Rodriguez leaned forward. "Because you've walked through the fire, Tyler. You've experienced ego and its consequences. You've had to rebuild yourself from the ground up. That journey, that transformation, makes you exactly the kind of mentor young students need. Someone who can say, 'I've been where you are, I've made these mistakes, and here's what I learned.' People don't need perfect mentors," Master Kim added. "They need honest ones. They need people who've struggled and grown, who can show them that change is possible." Tyler felt overwhelmed by the trust they were placing in him. "What if I mess up? What if I fall back into old patterns?" "Then you'll recognize it, correct it, and keep going," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "That's what growth looks like. It's not a straight line. It's a journey with setbacks and progress, but always moving forward." Jennifer reached over and squeezed Tyler's hand. "We'll do it together. We can keep each other accountable." Tyler looked at each of them, these people who'd seen him at his worst and still believed in his potential. "Okay," he said finally. "Yes, I'd be honored to try." Over the next few weeks, Tyler began his work as a mentor. His first student was a 15-year-old named Chris, talented but cocky, reminding Tyler painfully of his younger self. Their first session, Tyler didn't demonstrate any techniques. Instead, he told Chris his story, the whole thing, holding nothing back. He told him about the arrogance, the cruelty, the moment of being put on the floor by someone he'd underestimated. He told him about the shame, the struggle to change, the daily choice to be better. Chris listened with wide eyes, probably expecting a cool older student to teach him fancy moves, not this raw honesty. "So why are you telling me all this?" Chris asked when Tyler finished. "Because I see you heading down the same path I was on," Tyler said gently. "I see the way you talk to the less experienced students, the way you show off instead of helping, the way you measure your worth by how many people you can beat. And I'm telling you, from someone who's been there, that path only leads to emptiness." Chris was defensive at first, just like Tyler had been. But Tyler didn't push. He just kept showing up, kept being honest, kept demonstrating through his actions what real strength looked like. Slowly, he saw Chris begin to change, to soften, to think before he spoke. One day, About 2 months into the mentorship, Tyler walked into the academy to find Chris helping a new student with their stance, patient and encouraging. When Chris saw Tyler watching, he just smiled and shrugged like it was no big deal. But it was a big deal. It was everything. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared beside Tyler, following his gaze. "You're doing good work," she said softly. "I'm just paying forward what you gave me," Tyler replied. "That's how it works," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "We receive grace, we extend grace. We're taught with patience, we teach with patience. The lessons pass from generation to generation, but only if we're willing to be both students and teachers." 6 months after the incident, Tyler made his decision about the national championship. He would compete, but not for the reasons he used to. He'd compete to test himself, to represent his academy with honor, to show respect to every opponent regardless of the outcome. The tournament was tough. Tyler won some matches and lost others, but the biggest difference was how he handled both. When he won, he bowed deeply to his opponents and thanked them for the challenge. When he lost, he congratulated his opponents genuinely and looked for lessons in his defeat. He didn't win the championship. He placed 5th, which once would have devastated him. Instead, he felt proud. Proud of how he'd conducted himself. Proud that he'd competed with integrity. Proud that win or lose, he'd remained true to the values he was building. Master Kim and Mrs. Rodriguez were waiting when he came out of the locker room after his final match. "Well done," Master Kim said, embracing him. "I lost, though," Tyler said, but he was smiling. "You competed with honor and humility," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "That's a greater victory than any medal." As they walked out of the tournament venue together, Tyler thought about how different he felt from the person he'd been 6 months ago. That version of himself seemed like a stranger now, someone lost and hollow despite all the surface success. The journey wasn't over. Tyler knew he'd still struggle with ego, with pride, with the temptation to measure his worth by external achievements. But now he had tools to recognize those patterns. He had mentors to guide him. He had a community that valued character as much as skill. Most importantly, he'd learned the lesson that Mrs. Rodriguez had tried to teach him that day in the lobby. True strength isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself. It's about choosing kindness when you could choose cruelty. It's about being humble when you could be arrogant. It's about seeing value in every person, regardless of their status or ability. That evening, back at the academy, Tyler found Mrs. Rodriguez in the lobby. She was mopping the floor, just like she'd been doing the day everything changed. But this time, Tyler didn't walk past her. He grabbed a second mop from the closet and joined her, working side by side in comfortable silence. After a while, Mrs. Rodriguez stopped and looked at him with those wise, kind eyes. "You know, Tyler, I've been thinking about that day when all this started, and I want to thank you." Tyler looked up surprised. "Thank me? For what?" "I was horrible to you. You gave me an opportunity," she said. "An opportunity to teach in the most effective way possible. Not through lectures or demonstrations, but through a real moment, a real transformation. You reminded me why I love teaching.